How you doing today?
Boom.
Hello.
There we
Hello.
go. What's going on?
How's it going? Good
It's
to be
great.
here.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for creating the Captions app. I use it very, very regularly.
DAU, basically.
Oh my God.
I'm
DAU.
obsessed. Yeah,
I
for a
love
long
it.
time. I mean, we make a ton of clips. You've probably seen, and
We make
it's
a few
always
clips.
It's always a hassle to put captions over it, but you made it much easier. A lot of that, I want to talk about the history of the technology, the Whisper turning point, and then get into value creation in the application layer. There's so much we can talk about. But why don't you kick it off with just like introduction on like how you're describing the company these days, and then the most recent announcement.
Totally. I mean, so love that, by the way, you're an OG user. So thank you for being a user. But, it's a pretty young company. Like our product market fit was like 2.5 years ago, right? So like we were 4 people 2.5 years ago, and things have grown really, really fast. It all started with adding captions, your most basic thing. But it's evolved quite a bit. And so today, I mean, the way we think about the company today is like, video creation is hard, right?
Yeah.
And we've identified two problems actually, right? One is recording the video is hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys know this, right? And editing the video is hard too, right? It's pretty technical. And we want to solve these two problems. Like these two problems, we want to help people jump over with AI, right? So if you want to edit video yourself, if you want to record video yourself, go somewhere else, basically, right? We're going to actually do it for you. That's the value, right? And
So not going after
that,
DaVinci Resolve, not going after Premiere, an entirely new market.
exactly right. And we think of it very similar to Canva. Actually, like, Canva for video as an idea has been sitting around for a while.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually finally possible because of AI, right? Because the real value of Canva is you start with something, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a blank screen. And, it's not built for the designer, right? Most designers will look at Canva and be like, I could probably do better than this, right? But it's built for the person who's not a designer, right? And that's the same value that we provide. So on that note, right, like last year, we started working on essentially foundation model technology for video generation and for editing. That's going to help us achieve that. And, these are big projects, very expensive, but also very cutting edge. I think the most exciting part on the video gen side for me is like, we're very much focused on like talking videos, right? Which is, and by the way, like I'm also like kind of surprised almost in a way that we've spent so much time and so much money doing text to video on silent videos, right? Like what's the point, right? Like just stock videos. Like that's the negligible part of what a video is.
Yep.
Almost no time spent on videos with actual communication. So that's kind of what we've been focused on for last year.
Yeah. I don't know, what like breakthroughs are the most interesting to you? Obviously, like Whisper is super important. I feel like Whisper is great. And then all of a sudden it came down to like, okay, well, I want real time Whisper on the show. And then I got to go build that. Or Notebook LM. I like Notebook LM, like it still doesn't have an app, even though Google is paying people not to work and stuff. It makes no sense to me. And I'm imagining that like Captions could be an app where I'm getting like a Notebook LM style, like YouTube videos. YouTube's talked about this a little bit. They haven't rolled anything out, but you're starting to see a lot of this stuff. A lot of it's in like the slop tier. But what I like about Captions is that you can still inject enough of the human element to take it from it's a tool that's used in partnership with a human, so it still has that art in there. But what is exciting you, and what's the most interesting in terms of like where you want this to go?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like there's a pretty clear distinction that's developing that I'm starting to see, which is like amongst the foundation models, right? Like there's the text generation, like LLM type models, right? And those are solving a very difficult problem, is intelligence, right? Like an unsolved problem. No one's solved intelligence before, right? So, and by the way, we don't even know what the bound is, right? Like where does it end? Who knows? It could never end, right? It could go on forever, right? And then on the other side, you got, media generation. Like this is everything from like video generation to music generation, sound, audio, like all this stuff, right? These are solved problems. Like we can do rendering today, right? Like we can literally render anything you want with like CGI and stuff, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's just becoming a lot easier, and it's also bounded, right? Which means that there is a limit of realism, right? And then you've kind of solved it essentially, right?
Yeah.
You can't get more real than real. And once you're there, you kind of have achieved what you set out to achieve, right? And so I think it's a different type of problem. And also it means that it's not about replacing the human, right? Because what's actually happening is the craft is evolving, right?
Yeah.
The craft is different, but the creativity is still there. Whereas on the LLM side, that's actually potentially replacing the human. Not gonna
Yeah.
lie, right? That's potentially what it's gonna do, right?
Yeah.
So these are two different types of use cases, almost two different types of value that are being produced today. I think in LLMs, we fall definitely much more in that sort of media generation category where like our
Yeah.
goal is not to replace anybody, right? It's actually like empower a bunch more people potentially, right? And who knows, right? People come in, they use captions to make their videos, right? And we edit it for them. We like generate the video for them, and that just gets them started. But like 2, 3, 4 years down the line, they move on to Premiere Pro or something like that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong, right? So
How do
that's
you, on the developer side, we're seeing a bunch of startups where it seems like everything is just converging into this like one shot, right? Where it's like you have Lovable, Bolt, Rippling, Replit,
Replit.
sorry.
Rippling is one shot for your HRIS system.
That's right.
True.
That's right. So everything's kind of converging onto this like text box where you just tell it what you want, and then it makes a website or an app or things like that. I imagine content will maybe go that way for some use cases, and that's kind of like there's a lot of sort of momentum and convergence around that moment. How do you see? But that's just my point of view. What's your point of view on like how all this evolves, and how you're looking to continue to differentiate captions over time, other than just sort of like chasing perfect realism?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, so a couple of things there. Like, I think generally, kind of to, make a comparison on what you're talking about, right? Like, I think of it as like Canva for everything. That's actually what's happening, right? Because the magic of Canva, awesome company. I think the magic of it is not about how simple the UI is or something like that. The magic is that you start with something. It's not a blank page, right? And really, the biggest enemy of anything creative is the blank page,
Yeah.
and not the UI and stuff, right? I mean, think about like design software in general. You look at like Figma and stuff. Like Figma has like 6 buttons, right? Like it's not a hard UI, right? But it's really hard to make something good with it. Like it's really hard to figure out how you use squares and circles to make something that looks good, right? And I think the magic of Canva is you start with something, right? You're already 90% there when you enter, and then you kind of make some tweaks to get it to 100, right? And by the way, like think about ChatGPT. It's kind of the same thing, right? Like we're using it all over the place today, but it just gets you started, right? Like it's like, boom, I already have something. Like I need a job description. Boom, there's job description, right? For whatever job you want, right? And then it may not be perfect, right? You make a few tweaks, change things here and there, and you're done, right? And so it's like Canva for everything. That's what's happening. And I think same for music generation or video generation. Like all these things are going there. Our goal and our mission in this, like we're focused on specifically the communication sort of vertical, right? So think about this, right? If you think about a movie or a TV show or anything like that, right? Any kind of like media today, only a small part of that is B-roll, right? Like if this was a movie, like I'm in New York, so like it might open with like a shot of the Empire State Building, and then the next scene, like, oh, there's a New York taxi cab on the street passing by really quick in 2 seconds, and then the camera is in the room and we're talking, right? And that's actually the movie, right? And so much time and money has been spent on making the shot of the Empire State Building, and almost nothing on like actually getting the dialogue going, right? And that's kind of the weird thing, right? And like our thing is like, let's get that communication, that dialogue problem solved, right? That's one. And on the other side, just footage isn't enough. So let's get it edited to make it actually an asset, right?
Can you talk a little bit about growth for captions? There's a weird dynamic where it can be extremely valuable to go viral with like a one-shot thing. I'm thinking of Lensa, those magic avatars. That it was just upload a couple photos and you get a photo of yourself. Then we had the Studio Ghibli moment, which was a huge growth vector. It's not OpenAI's product, but it was still probably massively beneficial just to drive a bunch of extra installations and ChatGPT use, right? And so I could imagine you guys thinking like, hey, let's go make one-click Harry Potter Balenciaga generator. And like, we are just like really good at making like Harry Potter Balenciaga style videos. Of course, you need to put in your own tweak, but that's what we're great at. But you don't want to get pigeonholed into that, but it can be a good growth driver. Are you thinking about that consciously? Are you thinking about like, how can I get the next Studio Ghibli moment to happen in the captions app?
Yeah, I mean, so we are, but our philosophy on this, honestly, like think about both the Studio Ghibli thing, but also think about like original ChatGPT, right? Like I remember the time where, GPT was available. Like I would show it to my friends, like check this out, like check how cool this is. And people would be like, oh wow, cool, okay. Next,
Yeah.
like, right. And then suddenly ChatGPT came out, and like, by the way, I think it was very clear that they hadn't prepared for the amount of virality that thing got, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
even the name ChatGPT kind of gives that away,
Yep.
right? And so it wasn't a planned thing. It kind of just happened, right? Studio Ghibli, same thing. I don't think they planned it. Like it just kind of happened, right? So
Mhm.
I think if you create the right environment where people are given the creativity to go try something that's like an awesome technology, right? They can play around with it, make cool things with it. Like these types of moments kind of happen naturally. It
Mhm.
has happened for us several times with different technologies we released in the past. And a lot of times it's been unplanned. It's just like, when we plan for it too much, it doesn't happen. When we don't plan for it, it just like suddenly explodes like completely, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we've seen. And it's something we think about of like, how do we create that wow experience? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the growth and virality is happening because people are just blown away. It's just so
Yeah.
impressive, right? It's beyond anything anyone's ever seen, right? And I think that is a pretty high bar. So building on that, building in private until we reach that bar, releasing it as like a wow, this is like crazy. Like that's the type of stuff that we've seen work really well.
Last
Uh,
question.
do you have any sort of visions around what the just video content on the internet in 2030? Because I have this right now. There's not a huge incentive to make a video for one person, right? Especially in a business context.
Right.
If you want to explain something for 10 minutes to somebody in a business context, you pick up the phone, you call them, you spend the time to send an email or whatever. Now with something like captions, it's like, well, I could just generate a video of like how my product works and why it's relevant to this industry and all that. And so I have this sense that content generation is going to like 100x, 1000x, but human attention is not going to 100x or 1000x, right? It's just not possible. There's only so much time in the day. People use their phone for 6, 8 hours on average right now. They're still spending 2 hours a day on Netflix, but we're not going to suddenly like get 100 hours a day, even though people on TikTok entrepreneur influencers might want that. So I just have this kind of question around like, do you think the average video in the future gets 1 view, 2 views, and maybe it's not the average, right? Because certain certain videos will still go super viral and be sort of cultural phenomenons, but yeah, I'm curious if you think that's kind of like where we're headed.
Right. I mean, I think
Just
for what it's worth, I think the average video today is getting probably 1 or 2 views, right? Because like think about
Mhm.
Snapchat, like a lot of video, probably 1 billion videos a day, but sent to like, a few people are seeing it basically, right? For the most
Mhm.
part,
yeah,
private communication. And honestly, like Snapchat pioneered that. Like they kind of missed the TikTok part of it. It wasn't part of their ethos, to be honest, right?
Mhm.
But like they were more about the private communication. But I think the future is more video. Like for what it's worth, like, the way and I think there's an interesting sort of like move that I think will happen towards more video in AI as well. Because think about like how communications changed over time, right? Like we're not sending letters to people as often anymore, right? Like text messaging is kind of like very prone to miscommunication, right? Audio is definitely better. Phone call goes a longer way. Video call is like one step further, right? And then real life meeting is even beyond that, right? Oftentimes there's like even within companies like right there's miscommunication and like mistrust that builds when there's remote teams or things like that, right? And you got to watch for that,
Mhm.
whereas an in-person team just trusts each other so much more. So there is definitely something to be said about like these more sort of multimodal forms of communication, right, to use the term.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
uh, I do think that actually even on the AI side, right, like sure, chat gpt makes me a great writer, but like what makes me a great communicator, right? And we're really not thinking about that, right? Because communication is multimodal in itself, right? Like
Yeah.
the words that I'm saying right now, where I'm pausing, what I'm emphasizing, how my micro expressions are moving, like how my body's
Yeah.
moving, like all that is communicating in multiple forms, right? A
Mhm.
message. And that message changes if I change any of those things. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
words might be the same, right? But I
yeah.
can change the message completely by just changing the delivery of it, right? So I think today's technologies like just aren't capturing, right, like how broad communication actually is. And I think it will all evolve towards video over time, just as we've seen. Like this is not new. We've seen this happen before, right? So, and by the way, like I was at Snap when like TikTok took off, right? 2019,
Mhm.
that era. And initially, like TikTok grew a lot on the back of Snap. And a lot of people know this, but like they were running like $100 million a month of ads on Snapchat, right?
Mhm.
Initially, right? When they were not, there
Yeah.
was no
Let the
presence,
fox into
right?
the hen house.
Yeah.
And like there was concern like in the company, people were concerned that like are we like creating a competitor here, right? And
They
we were
were.
running A/B tests. Yeah.
Narrator, they were.
They were, yeah, exactly. But
Anyway.
like we ran A/B tests to test, right? Like if someone sees a TikTok ad, are they less likely to engage in Snapchat? Tests didn't show that, right? But the reality is that it wasn't true, right? They did spend less time on Snapchat. So
Well,
I
we
think
got to run. This was a
yeah,
fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for hopping on, and we'll
of
definitely
course.
talk to you soon.
Yeah, great
Yeah,
talking.
awesome.
Thanks for coming
Cool.
on.
Bye.